All right, welcome everyone. So glad to be here with you today. My name is Peter, and just want to extend my gratitude to Danielle for hosting today and welcoming me, and Marissa for creating Reloveution to begin with and inviting me in, and to each of you for taking some time out, whether you're here with us live, got well over 20 people on the call, or just watching the video afterwards. Thank you for carving some time out to invest in yourself. For me, this is one of, if not my favorite topic to speak about, because I feel like it's really where the rubber hits the road in life, right? In our relationships. And I like this idea. Maybe you've heard the concept pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Kind of a bit of a Buddhist concept. But when it comes to relationships, another way to say that might be ruptures are inevitable, repair is optional. Right? So if you've ever had a conversation or been in a relationship with someone else, there is a chance that things will go sideways. And yet there is always a possibility. There's no guarantee, right? But with the right sort of the things we'll talk about today, the tools and skills and really practices, my belief is there's always a possibility to repair a rupture that has occurred in a relationships, right? So ruptures are inevitable. Repair is optional or maybe always possible. And yet we don't always do that, right? And so we'll talk about some of the reasons why we don't put in that effort sometimes or feel the confidence to do so. And I'm going to introduce myself and get us started in a minute, but I just want to start really practically with an example. So I'm going to kind of begin with the end in mind here. My intention today is really to inspire you to believe it is possible to repair ruptures, to turn conflict into connection. An example I have from a couple of years ago, I hired a contractor to do some work on our house and put in some insulation, and had tried a few different contractors out, had a good vibe from this person. So hired them. He then rescheduled a couple of times for when he was going to come out to the house. And as a coach myself and entrepreneur, that's costly, right? When I was planning on being there for someone and they don't show up. So I got a little frustrated, but it was okay. And then I start to get these really curt emails from him. Just one or two words, can't make it. That day is not going to work. And even being borderline rude via email. And I noticed some frustration in myself, and I was really getting upset. Like, I help teach communication and customer service, and this person is not sort of upholding these values of professionalism and empathy that I really care about. So instead of crafting a sort of harsh email back, I chose to pick up the phone. So I gave him a call. Let's call him Steve. He answered the phone. I said, "Hey, Steve, this is Peter. You're planning on coming to do this installation at my house. And I just want to let you know I'm feeling a little frustrated at the emails that you're sending. They're a little curt and quick, and like they're not really respecting my time." And he just immediately says, "What? You don't like the way I email?" So there goes my frustration level through the roof, right? Just comes right up in me. And in the past, before engaging in this work that I'm going to share with you today, I would have just flown off the handle. "No, I don't like the way you email. Are you kidding me? I'm your customer. I'm going to be paying you thousands of dollars to do this project. I expect respect and consideration," right? So I would have behaved totally differently, but instead, based on these tools of mindfulness and nonviolent communication, things I'll share with you today, I was able to notice that frustration in myself, and I just stopped. I paused for a moment and checked in with myself and sort of remembered my main intention in life, which is connection, which is to lead with love. It's kind of how I describe my purpose. And so in this moment, he's like, "What, you don't like the way I email?" I took a breath and said, "Steve, what's going on, man? What's happening with you? Like, this seems strange. This is not how our first interactions went." And I think he was a little caught off guard, and he started to share. He said, "Well, actually, Pete, I'm in the middle of a divorce right now. My wife's trying to take my kids. I'm struggling with keeping organized in my business, and I need to keep making this money, but want to be prioritizing these other things." Within 2 or 3 minutes, Steve was actually crying on the phone with me. Clearly had a lot of this built up and bubbled up. And by the end, I understood a lot more deeply what was going on with him. I could understand why his emails were curt. He apologized for them and said, "I'm just under a lot of stress right now. I'm sorry, that's not the way I like to do business." And by the end, I wanted to do business with him more. He was even more accommodating of my schedule going forward, felt seen and understood, I hope a little bit by me. And it just totally changed the trajectory of what might have happened in that situation. So this is not a super important relationship in my life, right? And yet this conflict occurred, and I was able to take a moment to totally change how I responded, right? Changing reaction into response. And I like to think got probably a pretty different outcome that would have happened if I chewed him out on that phone call, right? So these are the kind of moments, and I've had so many examples of this. I have plenty where it didn't go that well as well. Those are less interesting stories, but this is what's possible, I believe, in this world of bringing some awareness, some intentionality into our relationships, into our communication. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see it? Can I get a few thumbs up from video? All right, awesome. Awesome, good. So yeah, so slowing down is the first part of this, turning conflict into connection. And I like to start by just inviting us, we've already started a little bit, right? But just inviting us to slow down a minute. So I understand I've been on, I think, most of the past Reloveution power hours eating my lunch as well. So I get if you're eating or doing something else or watching this. But I do want to invite you just to put your utensils down, close the 12 tabs you have open for just 1 minute. Just 1 minute, because these practices are learned through experience, through practicing. Right, so just want to invite just to see what it feels like to give yourself permission to do nothing for a moment. And I promise this helps to build these skills of in the moment, like I described, being able to pause and slow down. So just inviting you, nothing special you have to do, but almost inviting permission to not have to do anything. And I work with a lot of teams, and we like to start meetings this way when we remember, starting conversations this way, and just taking a moment just to check in. Some of us, it's the morning, some it's lunch, some it's evening. Maybe just seeing, how we're doing right now. What's going on in our minds, in our bodies. Maybe taking a few deeper than normal breaths. And if it feels helpful, I'll just invite one of my favorite check-in questions. What do I need right now? Based on what I'm feeling, experiencing, what might be most useful or helpful for me in this moment? And it's okay if the answer is I have no idea. That's fine too. Yeah. So again, just taking a few breaths together. And just seeing what that's like. I'm curious what that experience is like. If this was more interactive, I would actually ask you that question. But we'll keep moving for the moment. And I will invite, as we sort of get into some of the meat and the tools here that I want to share with you for the next 20 minutes or so, I do want to ask if there's a situation in your life. So I described this contractor situation. I could share with you more about my mother-in-law, other people in my life, plenty of moments where there continues to be opportunity for these difficult or challenging conversations. So for you, maybe there's a situation where conflict has already occurred, or you're feeling like you want to say something, but you're afraid, understandably, of conflict happening. So just what's a situation you might apply some of what we're talking about here today to in your life, maybe later today, this week, at your next Thanksgiving dinner, whenever it might be. Right, so just having that relationship with that person in mind can be really helpful. All right, so I know we're far in. I do want to just introduce myself a little bit, really briefly. So again, I'm Peter Callahan. I'm a human being, a dad of two, a partner, and a leadership and life coach, facilitator and trainer in some ways as well. And coming to you from central Connecticut, on lands that were taken from the Mohican, Pagusset, and Wappinger tribes. And I live here with my wife, my daughter Mackenzie, and my daughter Claire, my son Leander, and grandma Patty. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think what's most helpful context-wise, so I've been running my own coaching business for about 10 years, but ultimately I grew up as kind of a sensitive kid and was sort of taught to be tougher and stronger. And yet that put up a lot of defenses in me. So a lot of my growth has been sort of moving from this really insecure arrogance that came out, and I'm really trying to translate that into humble confidence and really kind of trusting myself and trusting the intention of others, which is something else we'll talk about a little bit more today. And as I mentioned before, I've just found these tools so helpful as a business student. So I went to the University of Rhode Island for business school, and return on investment, has ROI has always been one of my favorite terms. And so we'll talk about today, these two tools, many tools, but two main ones have just been really high ROI for me, of practicing and learning more about these have made a big difference in my life. And really my intention today is just to give you an overview of some of them. We'll have some more conversation after we're done with the recording, but just to give you an overview to see what you might be interested in diving into a little bit more deeply. And again, I just want to speak to the fear that comes up, right? We don't want to have difficult conversations because we're afraid of making the relationship worse or just being really uncomfortable and not getting anywhere, right? We've been there before with this person. It hasn't worked. Who's to say it's going to this time, right? So totally understandable reasons. And one of the things I really want to offer up to you is this quote that I love from Brene Brown from her book, Dare to Lead. Clear is kind. Unclear is unkind. Right? I often think of this as kind of filters, right? Or we're trying to hold these paradoxes of I want to be honest and I want to be kind. And which one takes priority, right? We want to do both. And yet if we let kind be the final filter that our words travel through, we're at risk of being nice, right? And my brother Dan's on the call here, and I think he taught me the acronym for nice. Nothing in me cares enough. Right? So we're being nice, but we're not actually being kind, right? And what does it mean to be honest? A little bit more than nice, right? And to me, that's what kindness is. So I love this quote from Brene. And when I do this work in groups, I often create some form of agreements, right? Maybe you've heard this as like group rules or guidelines. And for those who were in the Priya Parker book group for Reloveution a few months ago, she really talked about how creating a subset of rules for a gathering, the art of gathering is her book, or a group can be really helpful. So I'm not going to go through all these. I just wanted to give you an example. And I think my favorite tool is this last one here, ouch and oops. So giving each other permission to say, ouch, you know, what you said just kind of stung or hurt a little bit. And then the other person, understanding that our intent can be different from our impact, can say, oops, oh, wow, Pete, okay, I'm really sorry. Help me understand what your experience is before even like, let me explain myself, right? The defenses often come up. I didn't mean to do that, right? The contractor that I was speaking to before could easily have said like, oh, Pete, like that wasn't my intention at all. Like, I'm just in a hurry, right? Instead, like, oh, what's going on? Help me understand. I'm so sorry to hear that. So just really helpful to have these guys, especially for a facilitated group conversation within a family or a team, some situation like that. But what I really want to dive into today, as I referenced before, are these two main bodies of work, I'll almost call them, of mindfulness and nonviolent communication. And maybe you've heard of them before. If you told me 10 years ago that this is what I would be teaching about, I would say that's some fluffy woo-woo stuff that I'm just not interested in. And yet again, the ROI that I have found from these modalities has been amazing. And the way I've found it most useful, that I wanted to share with you, this structure that the author Oren J. Sofer has created, is putting these two tools together in these three simple steps in his book, Say What You Mean. And they are lead with presence, come from curiosity and care, and focus on what matters. So we'll have a little bit of time to touch on the first two, and then we won't really have time to dive into the third, but I'll just reference it. So these are three simple steps, as I've already described, that you can do in a short period of time. Right? So getting really clear on what our intention is, coming from the heart, and then staying focused on that intention. So what is mindfulness? We hear a lot about it, and I love this quote from the author Oren, who says, presence or mindfulness means being real. It's a willingness to be honest with ourselves. And that to me is the key, being honest with ourselves about what's happening just as it is. So as I mentioned before, I'm frustrated, I'm upset, I'm angry. I'm feeling really peaceful and non-combative right now. So I don't want to be in conflict. Whatever it might be, just acknowledging what's happening for us so that we can start from a place of reality. And oftentimes, I think the most skillful thing we can do is not have the conversation right now. If we're angry or furious or enraged, we're not going to be able to take the second step of come from curiosity and care, right? So if we're leading with presence, we're being aware of our current state and being honest with ourselves. Like, is this the time? What else do I need in order to be ready for this conversation? So how do we do that? We check in, right? We find ways and explore ways, as we did at the top here today. How am I? What am I noticing in myself? So my question to you, and maybe thinking about this situation in your own life, what can help you check in? How do you discern, is this the right time for me to have this conversation? Right? Another word for mindfulness is remembering. Right? So how do I remind myself to check in? And again, one of the themes for today is it's setting an intention. So remembering what's most important. What is my intention for this conversation? When it comes to mindfulness, just to give you a quick overview, and I'll just wanted to honestly put this in so you'll have it as a reference later. As in most models, it's nice, we could break it down into 3 steps, right? The second step, in my opinion, being the most important. We don't have to clear our minds. I'm sure you didn't earlier, unless you're already enlightened, but my mind had plenty going on, right? Bringing our attention to one point, an anchor, our breath, physical sensations, sound, doing our best to stay there, and then realizing when it's gone, when we've lost that anchor, that focal point, right? Oh, I'm not following my breath. I'm thinking about this other thing. The key here is that's totally fine. Recognizing your mind has wandered and gently bringing your attention back is where the muscle is built, not in being an amazing meditator who's focused on their breath or their body the entire time, right? The reps happen. This mental muscle is built through noticing and coming back with self-compassion and warmth, like, oh, great, I'm back, I noticed, another rep, as opposed to, there I am thinking about this person again or that argument. I'm such a terrible meditator, I'm supposed to be following my breath. Not helpful, actually counterproductive in the process. So lots more time we could spend on mindfulness, but just wanted to share that. And here's a couple more really practical life ways to start to grow this muscle. So I kind of referenced earlier, just pausing and stopping, taking a few deep breaths really helps to regulate our nervous system. I love mindful notifications when we get a buzz or a ding, noticing that it happened and saying, oh, hey, brain, I guess you'd like a dopamine hit right now for me to check this. Is this the right time? Or do I want to stay focused and check that email, text, whatever later? Mindful walking, just paying attention to our feet on the ground. And when in conversation, we can even bring our attention back to that other person or our bodies, whatever it might be. So again, just touching on these quickly for you, something we could spend a lot more time on. And so ultimately in this first step, we are leading with presence so that we can respond instead of react, say or do something that we wish we didn't. One of my favorite teachers, Dan Harris of 10% Happier, says, yeah, I'm just trying not to say the thing that will ruin the next 24 hours of my marriage. Right? So how do we keep checking in and be aware? So step number 2 here, coming from curiosity and care. All right, so we're present, we're aware of what's happening. Now, how do we get in touch with our hearts? Again, a phrase I never thought I'd say 10 or 15 years ago, right? But really, like, understanding why we want to have this conversation at all. Again, if we're being nice, we don't need to have conflict, right? We could just, apathy, right? I don't care, it doesn't matter to me. You go do you, I'm gonna go live my life, like, good luck. Right? By engaging in a conflict, in a challenging conversation, we are saying, you matter to me. This relationship is important for some reason. So how do we get in touch with that for ourselves and get really clear? And it just makes me think of this amazing quote by the late Martin Luther King Jr. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. If you're trying to fight fire with fire, what are the likely results? Right, so just grounding ourselves, coming back to what's most important. And then that can help give us the space to lead, to go first. Instead of, I need you to hear me, this is really important, I'm furious with you. As I shared with that contractor, hey, Steve, what's going on? What's happening? Right? And then even reflecting that back. So I love this term, Active listening is great. I just like the term reflective listening. So what I'm hearing you say is that your life is in turmoil right now and it's really hard for you to take the time to write a caring email. That makes sense, right? Acknowledging and validate. This is so much of what most coach training focuses on. Acknowledge and validate. And this is really just these basic human needs that I'll touch on in a second. But just remember, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So trying to use that ratio as best we can. And the best is when you're in a conversation with someone else trying to do that, because there's so much space for each other to listen, right? Now, but often that's not the case. So can we go first and offer up? So these are some of the tools. We can come back to these later. And what we're trying to do, as I mentioned with the brain, is relax our right brain, right? Our emotional needs. You see the grass and all people hanging out. Like that's the part of us that needs to feel safe and secure, right? So we're letting this person know, hey, I'm here with you. I trust you. I've got your back. I'm not against you. Right? If you're leading with against, you're just going to get the shield, right? The defensiveness from this other person, right? Again, I could bring my example up, right? If I'm just attacking him, he's going to attack back. But if I open the space of, hey, I'm not against you. I'm just curious what's going on. I'm trying to get my needs met. I'm here to help you meet yours. Then there's room for, can we get this scheduled? What are the next steps we need to take, right? That's the logic, the next step. And I really love sharing this with, the leaders that I work with who don't feel like there's enough time. Like, Pete, this is all acknowledge and validate, and I got to listen and ask all these questions. Like, we got to get things done. And I hear that and I get it. And again, the ROI of meeting these basic human needs can be immense. So I just love to share the main intention of communication, in my view, the intent to understand. I just want to understand. On one level, none of us can understand each other because we're living different lives, and on another, we're all humans having very similar emotional experiences that we can relate to. So can we give ourselves the chance to do that? And just one last set of tools to do that. And these are my absolute favorites. So this is it. And I threw my kids in here. That's Claire and Leander right there, who will be hearing these way more than they ever want to in their lives, right? So what and how questions. So instead of a closed-ended question, do you like this? Do you not? Right? That could be yes or no. Leading the question with the word what or how. My 2 favorite leadership questions. What are you working on and how can I help? Or to flip them, how are you doing and what do you need? Create so much space for that understanding. And then using the ultimate communication Jedi mind trick. Yes, and, right? This comes from improv comedy, and it doesn't have to be agreeing, but it's that acknowledging and validating. So it's a simple way to remember to acknowledge and validate. So what you're saying is this: I hear that you really don't like it when I don't accommodate everything that you're asking for. That makes sense. And this is your opportunity to make an offer or request. It would mean a lot to me if you would give me a little bit more explanation in your emails. Or would you be willing to, reach out to me the day before to confirm before coming so that my schedule doesn't get messed up? How possible is that for you? Yes, and I hear you, and here's what I need. How's that? That feel helpful? That's my absolute favorite one. And, maybe you've heard of that. I think there's a book around this idea of, instead of what's wrong with you, when you're frustrated with somebody, asking what's happened to you. So Daryl, I think, has a great example of this in The Office, right? Instead of what's wrong with you, man, what happened to you in high school? Why are you like this? Right? What is going on with you? But hopefully from that heart-centered curiosity and care, right? Like, something's going on. Like, I don't know what it is. And again, it's that realness. Just like, hey, I'm picking up on something. I don't know what it is. How are you feeling right now? I'm fine. My daughter does this all the time, right? Honey, it sounds like you're really frustrated. I'm not frustrated. Okay. I don't think you understand the words furious, or whatever it might be, but it seems like something's happening there. So just creating that space, again, gives an opportunity. There's no guarantee that you're going to get a positive response from someone else. And I just want to reference this video. We don't have time to play it right now. It's only 1.5 minutes. But please, if you're watching this later or here now, throw it into YouTube. It's not about the nail or just nail in the head video. The most useful 90-second video, and probably send it to your partner and your boss and anyone else in your life who you want to understand these concepts. Super, super valuable video to just drive home the point. Pun intended. All right, so we're not going to watch it right now, just for the sake of time. But this last step, and again, I think it's referenced in what we're talking about, but is just focusing on what matters, right? So we're present, we're in touch with our heart and where we want to be coming from and what's important to us. And now we want to verbalize that, right? Express what's really important. And I love this quote from Wayne Dyer, speaks to like our intention really creates our reality, right? So if we're aware of what matters and we can communicate that to someone else, we have a much better chance of being on the same page. There's a conversation I was having with my dad a couple of years ago now. I remember we were at the table, my dad and stepmom, and things got a little hairy. We were in a heated conversation, and I had this intention going into it that I just wanted to communicate how much I love my dad and my stepmom, and I'm grateful for everything they've done for me and for us. And we were like in it, and it was not going well, and my heart's thumping, and we're starting to raise our voices. And I said, can we take a moment? I just need a second. And then after a few breaths, it was just like, I just want you to know how much I love you, how grateful I am for everything you've done for me. That's it. And I just said it out loud, and it totally changed the tenor of the conversation. Like it just felt different, and we slowed down, and you know what I mean? It's just amazing to be able to pause and check in. So I just want to keep offering that up, really focusing on what is most important and trying to listen for that from what others are saying as well. I did just want to share what nonviolent communication looks like. So this is all built into Oren's book that I referenced, and obviously it's a whole body of work in itself. I've done a year-long training through Sounds True online, which I really recommend, of NVC. It's often referenced. And it's just really broken down into these 4 simple steps of observing and stating the facts, checking in with what our emotions are, the needs that are underlying those emotions that I was kind of referencing in that brain slide, and then any requests or actions. So you can see how a lot of this was built into what we we're just talking about. So I kind of like that simpler model, but I just wanted to put this in here too and give you what NVC really is, and was created by Marshall Rosenberg out in Detroit many years ago. And it's just, I find it extremely practical. So just wanted to share that with you all. And as we wrap up, especially for those who aren't going to be here for the conversation, if you're not live with us, from this conversation today, or this one-way presentation, what intention or commitment to practice were you willing to create for yourself? So I just dumped a whole bunch on you, right? There's a lot of concepts in there, but what stands out to you? What are you most curious about that you might be willing to explore a little bit further, or hopefully begin to practice and experiment with in your own life? So how can you do that for yourself? And then how can we, as a Reloveution community, or you within your circles or groups, sort of invite or start to explore these practices where you work, at home? What just comes to mind first that you might be willing to try out? And I wanted to just share this great quote from President Barack Obama, where he shares, learning to stand in somebody else's shoes, to see the world, to see through their eyes, that's how peace begins. And it's up to you to make that happen. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world. That's how peace begins. Or said more simply, clear is kind. So thank you all so much for being here with me today. I'll put up some references here if anyone wants to get in touch. My email is down there. Also got the Fresh Perspectives podcast, which includes 2 fellow Reloveution coaches episodes coming soon that are now recorded, both Mario and Valerie, and these are their 2 podcasts as well, Messy Roots and Unlimited. So just wanted to share those out. And yeah, thank you all so much for being here together today. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peter. And for that presentation, that discussion starter. So we're gonna stop the recording now. I put that in.